Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wolf, your testimony emphasizes on several levels how important human capital is to the competitive success of your firm and our country. Do you believe that our inability to attract and retain talent here in America will hamper our competitiveness and our national security?
I do. I would like to commend the committee as making an important distinction with a difference between the CCP and Chinese Americans and Chinese people in China writ large. There are roughly, as I understand it, 350,000 Chinese students here on our shores studying at our universities. We, in contrast, have about 350 from the United States in China.
And so a few just statistics here relevant to your point. The U.S. defense industrial base faces a critical shortage of high-skilled labor in key areas, with more than 80% of defense companies reporting difficulty in finding qualified STEM workers. International students account for roughly 40% of STEM PhDs awarded by U.S. institutions, including more than 60% of PhDs in computer science, but many are ineligible to stay. We just teach them, give them our knowledge, and then send them back to work for the CCP. About 40% of high-skilled semiconductor workers in the U.S. were born abroad. And in one study, more than half of PhD recipients in the field of artificial intelligence who left the United States cited immigration challenges as their biggest reason for leaving. So, Mr. Wolf, what are some of the principles that you can suggest to this bipartisan committee for smart, competitive immigration reform that will strengthen our national security and correspondingly weaken the CCP?
Most important is being that shining beacon on the hill and the American dream that people are attracted to. People are not knocking on the door to get into Shenzhen. They are knocking on the door to get into
We've
Silicon
got
Valley.
that, but what we have is this immigration system that doesn't allow them to stay. So what do we need to do to reform that?
I would recommend stapling a visa or a green card to anybody that's graduating with a serious advanced degree and has to stay here for a period of time to make sure that the technology and the know-how that they're getting is remaining here on our shores.
How important do you think it is to have bipartisan support for these kinds of reforms?
Huge.
So, Mr. Chairman, we've heard this point made by so many witnesses and briefers before this committee in our short history, and I hope we can find the political courage to come forward with truly bipartisan recommendations to our colleagues to fix this self-inflicted wound. Ms. Gorman, in our May hearing, Dr. Eric Schmidt stated that it would be a Dr. Strangelove scenario to let China set the rules of the road for AI weapons. I worry that AI weapons could become even more dangerous than nuclear weapons because there's been no international effort whatsoever to rein them in. I'm not afraid of how we will use them. I'm afraid of how our adversaries might use them. So, Ms. Gorman, what do we need to do to outcompete China on AI, especially AI weapons? And how do we ensure that the PLA isn't using American data to further their militarization effort?
I agree that would be a scary scenario indeed, and the Defense Department has put forward responsible AI principles. It's my hope and recommendation that those will be internationalized because this is an area where misunderstanding can quickly turn into catastrophe with AI weapons, the automated dead hand scenario. And the cooperation with the Chinese Communist Party is not high, I think, on this committee's agenda, but I think this is really an area where we need to set some ground rules on AI weapons to make sure this doesn't spiral out of control. As for the general competition with AI, we need to bring our strongest strengths to the table. That's the human capital, the immigration reform. You mentioned expanding H-1B visas and the optional practical training program, convincing more AI researchers to stay, not alienating them. Part of China's talent programs, the 1,000 Talents program and the like, are specifically designed to reverse this brain drain to the United States and promote brain gain. We need to capitalize on that. We also need to continue to fund public research and investments, not just in AI technologies that we know about, but also to de-risk the next generation technologies, be they EDA tools or semiconductor processing tools.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Wolf, how do we leverage our economic strength and our economic relationship to achieve some of the goals that Ms. Gorman laid out?
Some of it is government funding, making sure that we have availability, again, increasing budgets for things like the NSF and NIH, getting career scientists to be able to come here and stay here and build great careers, who then can go from academia into the private sector. Part of it is making sure that we have a robust economy of startups and big companies that can hire and employ people, and that on a relative basis, the greatest competitive advantage we have is the competitive advantage of people preferring to be here and working at U.S. companies and studying at U.S. universities because they are amongst the best and the brightest. So I would just encourage more and more and more of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.